me as a physician, I had never sold anything. And watching a master class in how the women on the floor of Henri Bendel sold beauty
Yeah.
products was amazing. I still remember the most valuable thing they taught me. They said, you have got to get the product in the customer's hand before you ever start telling them what the product is. Because once you have it in their hand, they feel obligated to listen. And so that's what I started doing. And the beauty editor from Vanity Fair came through. She's like, I want to write a story about you, which became our first big media press around the product.
Wow.
And then the beauty buyer, Melissa Green from Anthropologie, came through and they became our first national retailer. And it was really with Anthropologie that we created our subsequent next three SKUs because they said, our customer is loving this soap. Here are the other categories we think you'd be a natural fit in. Can you develop products in these categories? And we did using their customer feedback and customer data. When you're an entrepreneur, you are the salesperson.
Yes.
And then your first employee has to be someone who can sell better than you. And then ultimately, when you know that you have made it, is when your customer starts selling the product for you.
Welcome to There Is No Alternative, a podcast about entrepreneurship, where I talk to founders, investors, and experts in the consumer world. I'm Tina Bou-Saba, founder of CXT Investments, where I invest in consumer brands and technology. Today, I am so excited to be joined by Dr. Brent Ridge, founder of Beekman 1802, best-selling author of Goat Wisdom, and champion of kindness and community. It is really an honor to host you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I have listened to several of your podcasts. I think it's Tina, the acronym Tina is the most clever podcast name I've
Ah,
called. So kudos to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, thank you again for joining us. I love your brand. I'm a big fan of many of the products, so it is so cool to get to talk to you and hear this story.
Yes, a pleasure.
Amazing. Well, let's get started. I would love for you to share with us the story of Beekman. It is an amazing story. So let's go back to the beginning and hear how it all came into being.
Okay. Yeah. It goes way back. We're, 18 years old now. LinkedIn just gave me the notice that I'm celebrating my 18th birthday at Beekman. But my background is actually in longevity medicine. I had done research on the genetics of aging at Harvard, was on faculty at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, and decided to go back to business school at NYU. And after finishing business school, I took a position at Martha Stewart Living Omni-Media. Martha at the time was trying to get more to the health and wellness space, and she brought me on to head up the new division devoted to health and wellness. And my partner, Josh, he is a writer and was an advertising executive. And we were just having our great lives in New York City. We both came from very rural backgrounds and thought we had made it, in New York City. We had these great careers, great friend groups. We're in our early 30s. And in 2006, we went on an apple picking trip in upstate New York, but just as a weekend, getaway. It was kind of a tradition that we had. We would open up the map, and wherever our finger landed, we would find an orchard and go apple picking there. Well, one year in 2006, our finger landed on Sharon Springs, New York, which is about a 3.5 hour drive out of the city. We found an orchard, drove up there, went apple picking, and on our way out of town, we drove by this beautiful farmhouse, and it had a placard on the road, designated as a historical landmark. And we thought it must be some sort of museum. And so we pulled into the driveway thinking, we're just going to walk around. And we pulled into the driveway, we saw a for sale sign. And so on our way back to the city, again, this was 2006 when the economy was amazing. We decided we must buy this farm property.
Wow.
And I remember vividly, I used to do segments on the Martha Stewart show. And I remember sitting in the makeup chair next to Martha the next day with brochure listing about the property. And Martha's like, you have to buy it. And so, we did. All of our other friends were buying places at the time. And so we said, okay, we're going to cash in everything that we had ever saved up to this moment in our lives, take out $1 million mortgage because they were, basically free back then, and buy this property that we were going to use on the weekends. That's how obnoxious we were at that age. And I would say probably about 6 months into owning the property, we came up one weekend and there was a note in our mailbox from a local farmer, Farmer John. And he said, I'm losing my farm and I have a herd of 100 goats. Could I please bring them to your property to graze? Otherwise, I will have to sell my herd. And we met with him. We could tell how much he loved these animals. And we said, sure, bring them. The animals will have use of the barn. There was another little cottage on the property. You can live there. And it worked out great for us because we were only there sporadically. We're like, you can just keep an eye on things while we're not here. And we say that was the original act of kindness that started Beekman 1802, because 2 years later, when the recession of 2008 hit, my new division at Martha folded, Josh's advertising agency folded, and we had this $1 million mortgage. And we had to figure out how we were going to save the farm. And we ended up Googling, what can we make with goat milk? And the first thing that popped up was goat milk cheese, which we did subsequently start making at one point. But in the beginning, to become a grade A certified dairy cost more than we had to invest. And so the next thing on the list was goat milk soap. And so we started making bars of goat milk soap at our dining room table, wrapping the bars at our dining room table. We created a website and originally started selling them online. Again, this was 18 years ago in DTC. It wasn't then what it is now. And that's how the company started.
That is such a cool story. So, okay, on the point that you were just making around when you started, I think it's important to highlight that this was before Shopify. So,
Yeah,
in order to be selling online, someone had to be figuring out how to make a website, right?
that's right. And that went to Josh primarily. We had both played around with MySpace when it was around. I don't know if you ever were.
Yes, it's amazing.
But MySpace was the first thing that kind of taught us all, the layperson, like what coding was. Because you remember you had to figure out like what things to insert and bits of code and whatnot.
Totally.
So we had played around with that. And then GoDaddy had come out. And so we kind of cobbled together our website with GoDaddy and WordPress.
Yeah.
And because we were always about creating content that would drive interest in the product. So that WordPress component was really important at the time, and then GoDaddy for the e-com portion of it.
Yep. Okay. So I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I want to talk about this content creation point because I feel like you guys were OG content creators between QVC, television. Can you talk more about that? And how did you figure out that that was how to get the story out there? Because it was so early.
Yes. Well, I say our biggest skill set is that we are storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell a story, and we just have to find the outlets in which to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we first started the company, Facebook was just starting. It existed in the kind of that world of like connecting you to your college friends or your high
Yeah.
school friends, whatnot. But businesses were not really on Facebook at the time. And I think we were probably one of the very first farm businesses
Yeah.
on Facebook as the company. And that was really our first outlet with content creation, using Facebook, using our blog that kind of was following our transition from city people to country people,
Yeah.
and then putting that content out and allowing people to see, okay, here's two professionals who are starting over. And so many people around 2008, 2009 were in that same position, right? It
Yeah.
was a starting over period. And not unlike what we're going through now, people just started following along.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because we always just were looking for different outlets in which to tell the story. And Josh, about a year into the company after we lost our jobs, he started interviewing for jobs back in New York City. The economy had kind of stabilized and we needed health insurance. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to start interviewing for jobs. And he was interviewing for anything and everything. And he went into a job interview at Discovery Network. They were launching a new channel called Planet Green, and they were looking for a CMO. And Josh was interviewing with the president, Laura Michael Chisholm. And at the end of the interview, she said, well, you're not quite right for the CMO role at a network. She said, but your story is so fascinating about having lost it all. And now you're living in this tiny little town of 547 people and you're trying to start over. She said, that would make a fantastic docuseries.
I
And
love it.
and we had never thought about reality. These were early days of reality TV,
Yeah.
but it was also the time period at which the theme of the reality shows that were on were how can we make fun of rural people,
Hmm.
and so like Duck Dynasty, Honey Boo Boo,
Yes.
a swamp,
The simple
like a
life. Those.
simple life. And so we thought about it for a while and we said, well, we are open to it as long as you do not make anyone in our little community the butt of the joke, because we are
Mhm.
reliant on these people to help us grow our company and help us build our company. That you can make us the butt of the joke, of every joke, but everyone else has to look like the hero in the show. And the president, Laura, said, "You know what? I think that's a great idea. I'm going to hook you up with this production company, World of Wonder, who later became famous as a production company of RuPaul's Drag Race." They did the show, and they followed us for almost 3 years. And what was so amazing about that is it did, in fact, make heroes of everybody in our community. Everybody became stars, basically. Uh, put Sharon Springs on the map as a tourist destination. And in retrospect now, looking at it, it actually documented the very beginnings of Beekman 1802. And I think that's so critical in this day and age when brands seem to come about overnight. And there's kind of a lack of trust and a lack of a sense of authority and a lack of a sense of history. And I'm so grateful that we can point to that time period and say, you know what, you can go back all the way back and you can
Yes.
see that's where it began.
Oh, I love that. It's such a cool story. And yes, the company has these true, real roots, right? It's
Mhm.
heritage in the farm in Sharon Springs. It's so special. And yeah, I think that continues to be so resonant
Mhm.
with your community.
Yep. And
Beautiful.
we call all of our, because of how we started the company, and now the company is very advanced, it's
Yeah.
very tech forward, but we still to this day call every single customer a neighbor, because of how we began with our neighbors around the dining room table and how, with that content creation, people were invested in the growth of the company. They want to see the
Yeah.
company succeed. And that's what being a good neighbor is about.
Fantastic. So, okay, at that time, this is the early days of the company. Can you talk more about selling? And so, okay, so you guys built the website and then you had to figure out, okay, we've got this amazing product. This was soap at the time. I love your soap. I regularly use them. Um, what did you do?
Okay, so we started out online, but again, this was 18 years ago. So the only
Yeah.
person, I don't think anybody was making money online. Even Amazon was not making money, right? They weren't making profit. So we quickly learned, okay, we're not going to be able to really make a go of this business and pay off $1 million mortgage on the sales that we're making online alone. And so we sat down and we said, okay, where could we take this product, which was very handcrafted, very artisanal, and position it where it does not already exist? Because a lot of people see handmade soaps in boutiques, or they see it in farmers markets, that type of thing. But at that point in time, it had not really entered the luxury
Mm-hmm.
market at all. And so we said, okay, we know all the luxury stores in New York City. We know where this could sit. I said, let's go try to get in. And so I think it was a Wednesday, I got up, I loaded up a cooler, with a strap that I carried on my shoulder of all the bars of soap. And I did cold calls on all of the luxury department stores in New York City. Literally walked in and said, "Who is the beauty buyer? Are they here? Can I talk to them?"
Wow.
Uh, Bergdorf, Barney's, Bloomingdale's, Saks, Takashimaya. I did them all. And I would say about half of them, the beauty buyer actually materialized. But the first person to give us a shot was a buyer named Jennifer Miles, and she was at Henri Bendel, one of the jewel boxes of luxury retail, sadly no longer there. And she said, well, you have no track record, so I can't just bring you in. But what I will do is I will give you this 3x3 table on the main floor. And over the upcoming autumn season, so we're heading into kind of autumn holiday season, she said, you can have that table for free. And if you can sell the product and we'll see how it resonates with the customer. And I said, of course, I'll do it. And so every morning I would get up at the farm like 4:30,
Wow.
load up the truck with the bars of soap, drive the 3.5 hours into the city, set up my little 3x3 table, and stay there all day. I think the store closed at like 8 or 8:30, and then I would get in the truck. I'd make the 3.5 hour drive back home and start up. I did it every single day for 8 weeks. And so many valuable things happened during that, Tina. The first thing was me as a physician had never, other than trying to sell my patients on preventative health care,
Mm-hmm.
I had never sold anything. And so just watching a master class in how these women on the floor of Henri Bendel sold beauty
Yeah.
products was amazing. I still remember the most valuable thing they taught me. They said, you have got to get the product in the customer's hand before you ever start telling them what the product is. Because once you have it in their hand, they feel obligated to listen. And so that's what I started doing and just started becoming more comfortable telling the story. And then two amazing things happened during that 8 week period. One, the beauty editor from Vanity Fair came through, heard the story. She's like, I want to write a story about you, which became our first big kind of media press around the product.
Wow.
And then Henri Bendel is also always known as a place for discovery. So buyers from lots of stores would go
Yeah.
through there for new brands. And the beauty buyer, her name was Melissa Green from Anthropologie, came through, and it was a product that was made for Anthropologie. Like the way we packaged it, everything was just, it communicated Anthropologie. And they became our first national retailer. And it was really with Anthropologie that we created our subsequent next 3 SKUs, because they said, our customer is loving this soap. Here are the other categories we think you'd be a natural fit in. Can you develop products in these categories? And we did, using their kind of customer feedback and customer data. And that really was critical for us, because once it was like a critical mass point that we hit where
Mm-hmm.
we were getting the product in enough hands that we started hearing back from customers about what benefit they were getting from using the product. They were first buying it because it looked pretty or it smelled nice. But then we were really getting these reports on, wow, this has changed my skin, and I'm someone who has problematic skin. And that just piqued my curiosity as a scientist. What could it be about goat milk that has, one, helped these particular people who are using our product, but has made it used for hundreds and hundreds of years in cultures around the world for
Mm-hmm.
people who are having skin, people who bathe in goat milk? Why? No one had really ever studied it. And so we just started studying it. And that's how the company advanced.
Okay. I'm going to ask you more about that in a second, but I want to go back to one thing that I didn't realize is your story about Henri Bendel.
Mhm.
So I was a young person working in New York in the late 2000s, and at the time I was working for L Brands, which
Yes.
owned Henri
Yes.
Bendel at that
Yeah.
period in time, and it was amazing because we could use our employee discount there. And I had never shopped at a store like that. You know, I grew up in suburban New Jersey, like never went to any kind of like fancy department store. And Henri Bendel was an extraordinary shopping experience. So special, so curated, so beautiful. I miss it.
Oh, I know. I mean, it was an experience. I
Yeah.
still every time I go into the city and I walk past the store, which is still vacant, I'm like, oh, how
Mm.
sad. You know,
Yeah.
it was a gorgeous store on every level.
Oh,
Like amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
Totally. That is such a cool story. So you really learned to sell and to talk to the customer, to connect with them, sharing this story. I feel like that is an absolutely invaluable experience for founders in the consumer space.
100%, Tina. When you are an entrepreneur, and this is kind of the stages of success in a business. When you're an entrepreneur, you are the salesperson.
Yes.
And then your first employee has to be someone who can sell better than you. And then ultimately, when you know that you have made it, is when your customer starts selling the product for you.
Mm.
Because the word of the mouth is so strong and the experience of using the product and the experience of interacting with the brand is so strong that your customer is doing the sales for you. I think, we really hit that point at Beekman probably in maybe year 6 or 7. By the time
Mhm.
we got on TV for TV retail, we had hit that stride. And we say our company still to this day grows neighbor by neighbor by neighbor. We don't spend huge amounts on celebrity endorsements or
Mhm.
flashy ad campaigns. We really still rely on word of mouth to sell our product and get new customers.
I love it. So tell me more about the growth from the initial soaps
Hmm.
to the broader product line, going back to what you were saying on the experience at Anthropologie. Where did things go from there?
Yeah. So with Anthropologie, we did soaps and then we did bath soak and then we did moisturizer and then we did a lip balm.
Okay.
And so those were kind of our first 4 categories. And then when we got on TV retail and we were getting all the anecdotal reports and we were starting to start
Mhm.
researching the goat milk, but we still had no money to invest in actual research. And then when we got on TV retail, kind of the floodgates opened in terms of
Mm.
having the cash flow to be able to divert a portion of that, not just to inventory, but into actual research. The messaging that we first started using was that goat milk had the same pH as human skin. And that was so important for barrier health.
Mhm.
And so, of course, now everyone talks about barrier
Right.
health.
You guys were so early on
We,
the
we were
skin
very early.
barrier stuff. Yeah.
We're very early. And I still think to this day, the way you cleanse your skin is the foundation of your skin health. So I still think soap is very important, even though we've gone beyond
Agreed.
that. That's how we started. And then about 6 years ago, you started hearing a lot of research come out about the skin microbiome. Now, I was familiar with this because of my time working on the wards at Mount Sinai, where we had to work up with a lot of wound healing and
Mhm.
chronic wounds. And so I had an understanding about the skin conditions and the way the microbiome was important in wound healing. And so it was really fascinating to me as this more robust research started coming out. And then we just started looking at what are the components of goat milk and how they might influence the microbiome, because there's so many prebiotics that are just inherent in goat milk, particularly the oligosaccharides. And there's one particular strain of bacteria on the surface of the skin, lactobacillus, which I'll say of all of the bacteria on the skin that make up this ecosystem on the surface of the skin, it seems to have the most possible beneficial effects. And the most robust research has been done on lactobacillus because it's also inherent in the gut microbiome and is impactful on the gut
Mhm.
microbiome. So there's just lots of research. And so that's really how we started looking at the initial stages of our skincare routine is how we can build up the health and resiliency of the skin by making the microbiome so healthy that it can adapt to whatever insults we are exposed to, whether it's the sun, whether it's the pollution, whether it's other skincare products. That's really what made the company and piqued the interest of Ulta Beauty,
Hmm.
which we became the very first brand in Ulta Beauty to be certified microbiome friendly and to really start educating the consumer about, hey, the microbiome is the future of how we're going to be thinking about the health of the skin. And so that's how the trajectory went. And I'm always researching and reading. Like my Saturdays are spent reading medical journals. Those are I joke that that's my beach read is reading a medical journal. And just by happenstance, about 3 years ago, I was reading this journal. It's an oncology journal. And these researchers were talking about novel ways to administer chemotherapy so that the chemotherapeutic agents could be more direct so that they would not harm the healthy cells around
Uh-huh.
the targeted cancer cell. And so they were looking at exosomes, which 3 years ago were very few people even knew what
Right.
an exosome was. And so they said, yes, you can infuse the chemotherapeutic agent into an exosome and it can be delivered in a very targeted way. And so once they understood that, they started just looking for where was the most abundant, easily extractable source of exosomes. And so they were looking at lots of different, plant-based exosomes, human exosomes. And where they found the most abundant source was in goat milk. And
Wow.
I said, wow, that I'm curious about this. And so we analyzed the goat milk that we use in our product, and we found that there were 116 billion of these exosomes in every milliliter of the goat milk. And so
Wow.
that's really what kicked off our research in what we call better aging,
Mhm.
which is really, I think, a very unique proposition for us because we are, I think, if not the only, one of the few skincare companies that looks at like every single layer. So we look at what's happening with the microbiome of the skin. How are we optimizing the microbiome? And then how are we getting actives into the skin? So we're looking at delivery as well. So both the surface of the skin and then deeper into the skin. So we're kind of looking at this entire ecosystem of how we can optimize the skin for better aging.
So interesting. I mean, I feel like it starts to get into this broader wellness
Mhm.
space, which of course is, a huge theme right now,
Yeah.
movement, I suppose, but around longevity, better aging, skin health, as
Mhm.
opposed to just like aesthetics.
Correct.
It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and going back to kindness,
Yeah. Yeah.
when we started talking about the importance of kindness years ago, it was a nice, people are like, oh yes, I appreciate kindness,
Yeah.
but as a physician, I was always very interested in the science of kindness and about psychodermatology and how on a cellular level is kindness impacting us? And the easiest way to explain it to beauty enthusiasts, I found, is that, when you give an act of kindness or someone does something really kind for you and you get that kind of warm, glowy feeling, well, that warm, glowy feeling is coming from a surge of particular hormones in the body. So you've got a surge of oxytocin, you've got a surge of serotonin, and you've got a concomitant decrease in the amount of circulating cortisol in the body. And so that's what's causing that glowy feeling. And guess what? All of those things also impact cellular health and also
Um,
microbial health, microbiome health. So when we list kindness, we actually list kindness as an official ingredient in our INCI list. Um,
wow.
and we do that not just to be nice or to be sweet, it's because we know that kindness is as effective as any other ingredient in our product at making you healthier.
I love that. So cool. Wow. Um, I have never heard any other brand do that. That's a really special brand. We were on vacation in Europe, and we were in Amsterdam, and we had never been there before, but we were talking, you were noticing everyone is riding their bikes around, and and then we were also learning a little bit more about the healthcare system works in Amsterdam. Of course, it works totally different than in the US. And but one of the things that our tour guide was mentioning was we feel like it's really important for older people to actively participate in activities in the community as part of preventative health
Yes.
for them. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting. Right? A totally different way of thinking about health and what contributes to health. And it makes me think about, what you're saying and all these sort of factorial things that contribute to health.
Yes, and I mentioned at the top that I've done this research in the genetics of aging at Harvard,
Um,
and it's a project that's still ongoing. But at the beginning of the project, they were really trying to find some genetic component that contributed to extreme longevity, and searched and searched and searched. Uh, Nothing ever became really apparent. But the one thing that became apparent was and I think to this day, it's the only thing that has been shown to be positively correlated with longevity. It's optimism and the number of social interactions that you have. Now, think about that. Of all the biohacking things and biomarkers
yeah.
and, things that you hear about, the sexy things that people talk about, the only thing that has been shown to impact longevity is the number of people in your social network. And when we talk about kindness and community, which are neighbors, you know, we say at Beekman, we're trying to build an entire ecosystem that supports better aging. It's not just about what's happening on the surface of your skin. It's about what's happening in your
Mhm.
body, building inflammation. It's about what's happening in your brain and your mind and your thoughts. And it's about what's happening in the community around you. And so that's really what we think separates us. It's a different philosophy than I think way the most people in the beauty industry think about aging.
Very different. Completely different. Absolutely. It's fascinating. Really, really refreshing. Um, okay, so I want to ask you about Ulta and when did you all decide like it's time to go big with one of the biggest specialty retailers in the US, and how did you do that?
Oh, this is a story, Tina. We could do a
Mhm.
whole episode on this. But this was about year 10 into the company. We had invested so much money into doing this research on the microbiome and goat milk, and had really developed what we thought were three kind of category defining products. And we knew that we needed to go into one of the specialty retailers, either Sephora or Ulta,
Mhm.
um, with this product line. And so we met with both of them, and like trying to figure out which is the better fit. I remember that in that time period, we didn't know. We were like, which is the better
Mhm.
one? We put a post on Instagram and we didn't say anything. I did one post on Instagram and it said Ulta versus Sephora. And I just wanted to see what our customer
Yeah.
base on Instagram said. Well, it just opened the floodgate, right? And so, I would say it was probably about maybe 55-45, like
Yeah.
55% of people were Ulta shoppers, 45 were Sephora shoppers. I think that was primarily, Sephora was more prominent on the social
Mhm.
platforms, but Ulta was more available to more people.
Yes.
And so one of the people that we had talked to at Ulta in kind of doing this dance saw it. And then the then CEO of Ulta, they then told their CEO, if we want this brand, you need to go out and get this brand. And so Dave Kimball, who was the CEO at the
Yeah.
time, right, super amazing
Terrific. Yeah.
guy. He actually got on a flight and flew into Albany, New York, and then drove the hour out to the farm to say, we think Ulta is the place for you. And so we went with Ulta. Now, this was pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
So, of course, as you know, you've probably shepherded brands through this before. When you're preparing to launch in a store like that, it's very expensive because you're building up your inventory. You are, you know, paying for your end caps. You're building up your field team, which is so critical. So you're putting out millions of
Yeah.
dollars, prepare for this. And we were self-financed at the time. So everything that we were making, we were just putting back. We weren't even drawing a salary at this time. We were just putting it all back into the company.
Okay.
And so we invested all this money preparing for this launch into Ulta. And, Ulta launches new brands 2 times a year when they do the store resets. And so we were set to launch in the February that all the stores shut down because of the pandemic. Now think about this. He had invested all of this money up front. We're sitting on the inventory, with people hired, and then not knowing had retail changed forever.
Right.
Because that was like February. That was when it happened. So you're like, is this, what's happening?
Right. Right.
And so we said, okay, if we are going to go on as a company, we need to have some buffer. And so we said, okay, we're going to have to go out and find a financial partner so that we can have the resources to go through the unknown together. And so we started the process. And at the time, of course, beauty was a hot category. So everybody, even companies who had never invested in a beauty company, thought they needed to have a beauty company, in their portfolio.
Yeah.
So we had no shortage of suitors.
Mm-hmm.
But what was really important as we were meeting with all of these different, potential suitors was that we wanted to make sure that they want to understand what was special about Beekman. And we also wanted our relationship to be special in a way.
Wow.
And so as we were meeting with, all of these different, firms, it became very apparent to us that a lot of these firms, less so today, but still to a large degree, were headed by white men, which is fine. I'm not, I'm a white man. I have nothing against white men, but we're like, this is the beauty industry.
Yeah.
And it would make sense for a woman to be our partner in this. And there was one firm at the time that we talked to that was headed by 2 women. It was Eurazeo Brands, and it was headed by Jill Granoff and Adrian Shapiro. I don't know if you know them. Amazing people, long history in the industry. And we just loved the idea that this particular firm was headed by these 2 women. And so we decided they were the right partner for us. And that's how that happened.
That's terrific. I have one question for you about that. I remember that 2020, 2021 time so vividly. I feel like it's all, like we're scarred by that
Yeah.
crazy, crazy period. But it's also true, as you said, that beauty was hot.
Mhm.
Did you work with an advisor when you were doing that fundraising
We
to
did.
help you figure it out?
We did. We worked with William Hood and
Oh,
Partners and
mhm.
Moelis.
Yep.
Uh, so William Hood, Luc Henri, I don't know if you know Luc Henri, who was there at the time, amazing guy. He kind of shepherded us like close contact,
Yeah.
helped us choose the banking partner, which ultimately became Moelis.
Yeah.
But Andrew Shore and Moelis. I think we were his final deal that he ever did
Okay.
in his
Yep.
career. So it was just special on all levels. And as painful of an experience as a lot of people talk about, a lot of entrepreneurs talk about with the fundraising process, it was relatively painless for us. We thought it was interesting
Yeah.
and, meeting so many people and hearing their interest in the brand. But yeah, but it was great to have people there to help us. And I think most entrepreneurs, unless you have that background, you need someone to
Right.
shepherd you through it.
Right. That makes sense. And I mean, I'm sure that like the business had been bootstrapped for such a long time. And so that is a huge decision
Yeah,
to make to bring on an outside partner.
that's right. That's right.
How did that impact the day to day of the business and then also the leadership of the business in this next chapter?
Yeah. It's interesting because Josh and I, we never called ourselves CEO. We were always just founders.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
and we had started thinking about, I would say about 3 years before we entered Ulta, we had started thinking about, oh, well, we probably should be prepared from a book standpoint and whatnot for the ultimate need to bring in extra cash.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had hired our first CEO about, I would say, year 6 of the company, a guy from finance. His name was Mitch Hera, long history in finance and M&A. And for specifically to say, we need someone who can prepare us for what might be inevitable. And so he came on board and he served us as CEO, almost up until the process. But something
Okay.
very fascinating happened. And I know you don't know this story, but it actually became the subject of a Harvard Business School case study. This particular moment of history of Beekman 1802. There's a Beekman 1802 case study at Harvard Business School. So we had this amazing CEO, Mitch Hera, and while he was getting the ship in order, he realized that one of our co-manufacturing partners, we had become about 85% of their business. And of course, they were getting a big chunk of our revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, maybe the strategy at the moment is not to go out for extra funding, but to own more of your revenue.
Right.
And so he concocted this idea of buying that manufacturing partner, which we ended up doing. But in the negotiations, which, as you know, negotiations can sometimes be brutal,
Yeah.
particularly with someone who has a long history in investment banking and
Yeah.
M&A. He happened to be Harvard Business School graduate too. So, I don't know if that was to his benefit or not, but he lobbied very hard on behalf of us and the company in that transaction, so much so that some of the people on the other side of the table became very frustrated. And so ultimately, to get the deal done, the company that we're acquiring, some of the employees were going to be critical to bring into our company. They said, this deal will not happen if Mitch Hera stays on as CEO.
Oh, wow.
And so at the very last minute, and if people are interested in the details of this story, they can download the Harvard Business School case study.
I'm
Uh,
definitely going to download it right
it's a
after
great
this.
story. It's great. They did a great job with it. The very last minute, like I'm talking about midnight the night before the deal, we had to fire Mitch in order to get the deal done.
Oh, no.
And the deal was signed. And then we had to sit back for a while and think, okay, what's the CEO that we need next? Like, what is the next challenge for the company?
Mhm.
And we said, okay, the next growth period of the company is going to be really operational. Like, we need to make sure we have warehousing, the
Mhm.
3PL, like all of this stuff figured out. So we need someone with a strong operational background, which we ended up having in this company that we acquired. And so we elevated someone from that company to be the CEO. And that person served as the CEO through the transaction with Eurazeo. And then Eurazeo purchased 51% of the company. So they
Okay.
had control, which gave them the ability to choose the CEO. And so they put forth, they're like, okay, our operations were in place. They're like, okay, now we need an industry veteran who can get us ready and prepare us so that we feel like a true beauty company. And so they brought on board Jill Scalamandre, who I think you're familiar with, been in the industry for a
Yeah.
long time, launched Prada Beauty, was it Bare Minerals, like just like a stellar
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
And so she came on board as CEO, and she's been with us now since shortly after the investment.
Got it. That's terrific. Yes, she is extraordinary so that's
Yeah,
great. That's
yeah.
great. So, what's next for the company? What's on the horizon?
Tina, being involved with the industry, everything has changed in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Literally everything. I think Omni-Channel has become much more important.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like specialty retail was important. And there are brands that became very, very successful in one channel, whether they were Sephora's exclusive, whether they're Ulta exclusive, whether they were
Mhm.
exclusive, Amazon exclusive. But you're seeing that reliance on one partner is not sustainable for the long term because a lot of those companies that were so focused on one distribution channel, they were acquired, by strategics, and then that thesis did not pan out.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so I think, we're fortunate in the fact that our company developed naturally as an omni-channel company.
Yeah.
And so we have the proof points, maybe not as outsized in growth as, single channel distributed companies, but proof points in omni-channel that we can exist on the shelf and exist on TV, or we can just exist on Amazon and be successful in all distribution. So I think that's becoming more important. And the time period that we had first with Instagram and the rise of social media and what that did, particularly to the beauty industry,
Yeah.
was a unique moment in time. And then just as that started to feel like it might be saturating and coming to an end, the pandemic happened.
Yeah. Yes.
And then that threw another round of kerosene onto that because two things happened. One, people were staring at their screens more because they had nothing else to do. They were seeing themselves on Zooms, and they also had stimulus checks and money in their pocket. And so people, like, the amount of fuel that was thrown onto the beauty category, we will never see again.
Yeah.
At least in our lifetimes, probably. So it's just been a total reset in the industry and going back to um, not a worse time, but like a time pre-pandemic where you might see growth of like 3% or 6%, not what we were seeing the past decade.
Right. Right.
And I think for people who entered the industry anytime during the past decade, they don't understand what it's going to mean to go back to what it was pre that. And it's a complete reset in how you think about growing a business. And I think a lot of like young entrepreneurs who are starting brands now just need to be aware of that because I think a lot of their ideas of what success is like in our industry is based on what they saw over the past decade, which is not the not where we're at now as an industry.
Yep, I completely agree with that. Like, it is a long game,
Hmm.
and there were a lot of factors that drove really spiky growth during that pandemic period, but I think you're right. Oh, it things will revert back to the more normalized,
Correct.
growth rate going forward.
People are always going to be interested in beauty. I
Yes,
think the convergence of beauty, health, and wellness is an important one. I think it's a natural one because I think people are starting to realize the whole body acts together. So what I'm putting in
yes,
my body, the activities I'm doing with my body, the environments, these are all impacting my skin and vice versa. What's happening on the surface of the skin can lead to systemic inflammation in the body. So like
totally.
it's all connected. I think the consumer is there and they're primed and they're ready for that. They have that understanding. It's a lot to educate. Unfortunately, the attention span of consumers is getting shorter and shorter. So what
Mhm,
brands have to do now is figure out how can I capture attention and then educate.
mhm.
That's a hard thing to do. Like, how can you be a science forward company where you really have to do a lot of education about what you're doing and why it's important, but not lose their attention? It's a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Well, building on that, one last question for you. This has been an amazing conversation. Um, you and I met through our relationship with Leaked Labs, so an exciting new brand, and we both interact regularly, I'm sure, with beauty founders and emerging brands. What advice do
Mhm.
you have for early stage founders in the beauty and wellness space?
I think you said it. You have to play the long game.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what is your differentiator, which is what I loved about the idea that Christina and Alexis
Yeah.
have with the labs. It's a true innovation. Like, how can we bring not only just bring product to enthusiasts, but build a community around it,
Yes.
which I think is most brands do not have the ability to do, but they have the ability to educate,
Agreed.
reach enthusiasts. That's why I told them, like, the product itself is the gift with purchase. The thing you're buying into is the community.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you're
Um,
right.
but I think, brands have to find that purpose and find what they are solving for the customer, because the world does not need another beauty product. Even the most advanced science in the world, the consumer doesn't need it. You have to figure out what role are you going to play in their lives that's going to make them want to invest in you by buying your product.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That's terrific advice. Brent, thank you so much. It has been really wonderful, an honor to host you. I love what you're building. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Tina. It's been a pleasure.
If you liked this episode, find more on Spotify and follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, where we share highlights.